Okay, we'll get started in about 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so let's talk about brushes. So just follow along on the screen there. I got a new document, and this is a soft brush. You can see it's full intensity in the center, and then it fades out to nothing just outside the ring. This is a hard brush, and there you go, brushes. No, we are not done. Look at this. Watch. Okay, I made a line with a brush. It looks like a worm, doesn't it? What's the deal with these little scalloped edges? Anybody know?
It's the arc
of the top of the brush. So when I click and I drag a little bit, hey, nothing's happening until I get to here. Oh, every now and then it puts another circle down. It's almost like my brush is just a picture of a circle. Maybe just a picture of a fuzzy circle. And that's basically what it is. If we take a look at the settings on my brush, if I go under Window and Brush Settings here, I can see that I have a spacing of 25%. So if I do a click and a drag, every 25% of the width of the brush, it draws down another picture of the brush. But what if I increased that spacing? Anything over 100%, like if I did exactly 100% of its width, we would have basically a little string of pearls across there. All right, that's kind of mildly interesting, but I bet we could do more with a brush. The angle of the brush. This is a circle. This is a circle turned 45 degrees. So that's more exciting. It doesn't even have to be a circle. Now it's an oval. If I did a bunch of ovals, okay, all right, that's getting a little bit more exciting. We can make it really, really thin, and I could have like a calligraphy brush, or if I brought that spacing back down, there we go. Size. They don't have to be the same size, do they? If I were to bring up this size jitter, I could get a bit of randomness in the size of the brush, which is more exciting. Each click is a slightly different sized brush. All right, a little bit better. Angle jitter. Jitter is just randomness, and you can add randomness to the brush. So here I added randomness to the size of the brush. Here I could add some randomness to the angle of the brush. So basically every time it puts another little brush down, the size and the angle are going to be random. In fact, I've seen some people where they'll do a spinning healing brush. So if you don't want the, there we go. If you don't want a soft edge brush, because it sometimes leaves kind of soft edges, but a round brush leaves really hard round edges, this is a brush that just spins randomly as you go. Kind of a little barbed wire sort of effect. In fact, if I brought the spacing up a little bit more under the brush tip shape, there we go, a little crown of thorns there, or a tinsel on a tree, you know. Or what if I was doing an invitation to a kid's birthday party, and I wanted to make it look like it was confetti. So I brought the spacing around, and we go back to the shape, size. Ooh, angle jitter, we have the angle going all over the place. Even the roundness, we could play around with the amount of roundness. And if I bring the spacing up a little bit, there's some confetti. Look at that, it's confetti falling all over the place. Although black confetti is a little bit morbid, what if I made it red confetti?
Can you do a color jitter?
Well, yes, we can. First off, let's take a look at the scattering. So there's the shape. We can play around with the size, so some will be a little bit further away, some will be a little bit closer. The angle kind of looks like they're tumbling all over the place. Color dynamics. If I were to play around with the foreground and background jitter, what if I wanted red and blue? Look at that. Everything is some kind of random tone in between red or blue. Now, it's all different colors because I have apply per tip. But if I take that off, when I click, I've got purple. Anything subsequent will become purple. If I click again, it'll be something in between red and blue. And when I click, it determines the color, and everything will be that color. If you do the apply per tip, every time you click, it'll pick some other random color in between red or blue. That's looking a little bit more like confetti. But I mean, this has taken a long time here. If I brought the spacing closer together, it would kind of look more like a line of confetti. But what if I went to scattering? let's tell it to scatter. Or maybe if I brought the count up a little bit, so there's a little bit more in there. Now when I click and I start dragging, it throws down, you know what, that spacing is still too far apart. Let me bring that spacing back down. Oh, I was at 1,000%. That's more like it. So there's some nice looking confetti in there, although they're all the same brightness. I could play around with, say, brightness jitter. Some will be lighter, some will be darker. Now these are all just circles, but brushes don't have to be circles. If you were to look through your brushes, in the legacy brushes, you've got like leaves, you've got stars, you've got all kinds of stuff. Let's say I wanted to do an invitation to a fall party. So I went through and I looked through all my brushes. There's general, dry media brushes. Under legacy brushes, look at these. We've got stars, pencils, we've got, ooh, grass. I could do like a lawn. Okay, that's an unusual colored lawn, but if I went to say dark green and light green, maybe like this, different shades of green. Oh, there's a nice little lawn of grass in there. Maybe for the party I wanted to make it look like leaves were blowing around. I could go to my scattered maple leaves, and if I did nice fall colors, say like red and yellow. Those are nice fall colors. And in between red and yellow, if we mix them up, we should get some oranges. So I could, I want a little bit more randomness on there. Let's take a look at the settings. Color dynamics, oh, foreground and background. There we go. Ha, there we go. Oh, why is it? Oh, a hue jitter. Let's take that hue down. Now it's just those fall colors. There's too many leaves. You can play around with things like the count. Under scattering here, we could do less of them. There we go. And just a little dusting. And I've done stuff for clients. One was a website where they wanted like fairy dust, kind of twinkly. So I had a star one. You can imagine if these were like all stars, it would look really tacky. So that's not bad. Those are brushes that are pre-installed, but you can find other brushes online. You can find like fire brushes, smoke brushes. I've even seen eyelash brushes. So if you're doing like a fashion shoot, you can have little eyelashes stuck on. You can even make your own brushes. Like, let's say I had a logo, and my logo was really creative. It was a G. So I got black G there. Although, a better font might be appropriate. Let's do Times. There we go. That's my logo. And if I make a marquee selection of that G, and I go under Edit, Define Brush Preset, and I'll call this my logo, and I'll hit OK. When I take my paintbrush, it's a G. If I switch around to yellow, it's yellow. If I take black paint, it's a black G. Or maybe I want to watermark my stuff. I don't want people stealing my stuff. So I could do like a 50% opacity G over top of it. And if it's an image, you can do images, you can do all kinds of stuff. In fact, let's get you guys playing around with a brush in Photoshop. In the brushes folder, you'll see something called chain.abr. If you made a really awesome brush that you wanted to share with friends or use on other machines, you could save it as an ABR. Let's install that chain.abr file. Just double click it. Go to that chain.abr, double click it. It'll actually install that into your brushes panel and just whip up a new document. Maybe a little letter size 8.5 by 11 there. And call up that chain file, that chain image. Now you'll notice it's 101 pixels in size, 101. You can make it different sizes, but its default size is 101. And if you just click with it, it is a chain. Okay, let me move my opacity up there. There we go. That's not a chain, that's a silly looking cube. But it's two pieces of a chain. You imagine this is one of the links, and then the other link is turned 90 degrees and clicked onto there. And watch what happens if I click and drag with this. The spacing of the chain is such that the next one will appear linked around the first. So that's kind of cool. But even cooler, look at this. It follows whatever direction you move your brush. And there's other cool things you can do as well. Like let's say I did this on a new transparent layer and I did the brush across here. I could throw on some layer styles. Maybe I'd do like a little bit of a drop shadow onto there. Maybe something like that. Now, if I draw, that shadow appears at the same time. You could put on bevel, stuff like that. What is it that's making it follow the direction though? Remember we had all kinds of settings here, like for the shape dynamics, you could change the size, the jitter. Angle jitter. This will change the angle that those appear. And if we just make it, say, off and we swing it all over the place, you get this weird, just things falling everywhere. But if we set it no jitter and the control. Now, if you guys have a Wacom tablet, like one of those pen tablets, any of these options, you can choose pressure. You could say the size jitter could be controlled by pen pressure. So if you pressed harder, you would get larger brush sizes, larger chain lengths, and if you pressed very gently, you get smaller chain lengths. But we can also control it with things like initial direction. So if I start going horizontally, they go horizontally. If I start going vertically, they go vertically. But if I change directions, because it's initial direction, the initial direction was straight up and down, so it doesn't change at all. But if I set it to just direction, whatever direction I'm moving is the direction that's going to point. So let's take a look at making a custom brush. Let's just reset that back to white. You can either don't close it, don't save it. Go back into the brushes folder, and you'll see there's something in there called Uncle Ant. Call that up. And we're going to make our own brush, a custom brush. Now, it doesn't have to be a selection of just what you want the shape to be. I've had people trying to select this with magic wands. No, it'll use whatever grayscale information is within an active selection. So if we just took the marquee tool and selected this entire ant, or another fast way of getting this entire document selected would be select all. So give it a try. Open up the image, Uncle Ant, select all or Command A, and under the edit menu, define a brush preset. And you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call mine Ant. There we go. And I'll hit OK. Look at that. I have a brush that looks like an ant. Let's see if we can wreck somebody's picnic. Let's make up a new document here. I'm just going to do it 8.5 by 11 again. And if I click, boing, there's an ant. Now, brushes, because they really are just images. This is just a picture of an ant. A circular brush is just a picture of a circle placed down every so often. They have a certain resolution to them. And in this case, my ant was 487 pixels high. Now I can make it larger or smaller. If I do a smaller ant, it's, smaller. But if I go larger, let's say I want to make a huge ant, say I take it up to 1800 pixels or even bigger, blah, it will have a little bit of a soft sort of look because it is just a pixel-based image. So if you're going to make a custom brush, make it the largest you think you would need. Let's say you've got this fantastic logo and you've got it 1,000 pixels wide. Make it that 1,000 pixel wide brush. If you have a small version that you used on a business card that's only 200 pixels wide, don't make the brush out of that because the biggest you can make it is 200 pixels wide. If you make it larger, it'll look blurry. All right, so there's some ants, and if I do a swoop with it, it's just some creepy looking centipede type thing. I could play around with the spacing. If you go into your window and brush settings, and under brush tip shape, you can play around with the spacing, and that's a line of ants. But it only works if the ants are going, let's say the picnic is at the north and to the east up there, then it works out great. We got a bunch of ants heading to the picnic. If I try to go this way, well, they're only going to point that direction. Doesn't matter what I do. Although we can change the angle of them. I could pull this around so they're facing another way, but they'll always be facing that way. Let's pull this around until they're all facing to the right. And then, under Shape Dynamics, for the angle jitter, let's set the control to direction. Now, whichever way my brush is going, the ants are going to be going, whichever way my cursor is traveling. So that's kind of cool. If we had a scene where we want to put some ants in there, a little picnic attack or something, although it's not all that creepy yet, is it? I think we can make this creepier. If I brought the spacing up a bit, and on the shape dynamics, ooh, scattering. Take a look at this. If I put the scattering, both axes, they're not perfectly all in a line now. Because, ants, they do tend to march in a bit of a line, but, maybe not all perfectly in a line. That's a little bit more convincing. Although are ants all exactly the same size? Not necessarily. Maybe I'll throw a little bit of size jitter on there. I mean, we don't want too much. If I crank this really, it's like 100%, I'm going to have some big ants and I'm going to have some really, really tiny ants, which, that's not convincing at all. Ants aren't really that different in size. you'll notice that there's a minimum value. So I can say, well, you know what, a lot of jitter, but down to a minimum size of 80%. So now I don't end up with some really tiny ants. That looks pretty good. Even the angle, maybe they're not all going the exact same direction. I can give a little bit of angle jitter on there. Now we got some variation in that. That's getting creepier, isn't it? And if I really want to creep people out, under count, we could give a whole lot of count jitter. Now you'll notice with the scattering that I've got right now, some are above, some are below, but they're all kind of in the same line when they appear. If I go to both axes, it'll be a little bit more of a random distribution. There we go. That's not something you want to see coming towards you at a picnic. Or that, or any of this, really. How's everyone doing? Sorry, are antiphobic? Oh, when it's like that writhing mass? There you go. Okay, so guys, your task for the lab will be to create something using your own custom brush. I'll show you some examples of what students have done in the past. Yeah, okay, well, hang on, let me get rid of this first. It won't be as creepy. There we go. So make some kind of a custom brush. Make like an invitation to an event or whatever, like a fall party. I'll just show you some examples of what students have done in the past here. I mean, this was just one of the brushes that came with it. If you look in your legacy brushes, there's one that is leaves. What do we got here? This one right here, leaf brush projection. There's scattered leaves, there's maple leaves, there's grass, all kinds of stuff that comes with it. So this is just the leaves. This one, some snowflakes, and a little bit of twinkly, star stuff kind of scattered around in there. Now this one, she did a logo. She took her logo, made it into a custom brush, which in this case was great. She just kind of dropped it at the bottom. But you can imagine this as a watermark. I mean, this might be a bit intrusive, but if you switched it around to white, maybe if you dropped its opacity a little bit, you can imagine that kind of dropped tastefully in the corner, stops people from copying your stuff. This is a way of really easily marking your images. And because it's a brush, you can use those square brackets to make it larger or smaller. So if you make it pretty big, you can scale it down as much as you need. This was just a little heart-shaped pattern in the background. They played around with some color effects on it. She didn't know what she was doing in her life at the moment, so she pretended she made a movie about it. Twinkly stuff around the top and bottom there. A firefly festival, little sparkly bits. These are the little leaves that came with it. So play around with it, have a bit of fun. This one I thought was really cool, actually. These large round brushes here. There are some other things in here, like the color dynamics, the transfer, wet edges. You can simulate a lot of different effects, like different types of wet paint, watercolors. You'll also notice that there are actually some pretty fancy brushes in there, like a lot of the Kyle's brushes and stuff. They're meant to be, simulating kind of natural media sort of stuff. So he created a very large one with wet edges, and also, look at that one. A little tiny spinning brush. Different colors can kind of look like that kind of flocking that you sprinkle onto glue when you're doing like model making and stuff. So a lot of different effects. Play around with it, come up with some kind of a brush. Like I said, it doesn't have to be just like a single shape. It can be something more complex. But if it has grayscale information, like if you tried to make a brush out of a picture, let's say I called up this photo here, and I said, I'm going to make a brush out of her face. It'll work. I could select this, and I could define that as a brush preset, but you can get a sense right now of what that brush is going to come out like. If I then took some paint and I painted, there's that brush. Anything that was white or lighter color will be see-through. Anything that was black will be visible. But if I did this with, say, red, that's that. So I mean, it's not all, and actually, if you do it on something lighter, you get a slightly negative version of itself. So think carefully about what you want to create. I've seen people doing like little kind of cartoon graphic things. Those come up quite well. But if it's got a bunch of colors in it, the colors won't carry through into the brush. Okay? Play around, see what you can come up with.